Hi everyone, sorry, I think the video cut out there. So I'm just going to carry on from where I was before, which was highlighting the repetition of explain yourself. So explain yourself comes up several times. So let's have a look at those. We've got one on line 4, 10, 24, but one on the top of the stanza here. Let's just have a double check. Hopefully I've not missed any more. Okay, so I'm going to label those as repetition. Now remember that we never label a feature without giving it an inference. So let's have a look at what we've got here. So explain yourself, explain yourself, explain yourself. So this is direct to the reader. We've got this second person here. So it's direct address. It's quite argumentative, isn't it? There's a demand there. Well, it's an imperative. It's telling you what to do. So an imperative is a command. Explain yourself. Tell me why. Give me a reason. So these are my inferences. So I'm thinking, why is he using that command? Why is he using that repetition? I think he's repeating it because I think that shows his frustration, and perhaps confusion as well. Although I'm going to put a tone box around those because that is his tone. So he wants a reason, he wants an explanation. Is it confusion, or is it more explain how you come to feel like this is okay? He wants people. You can tell that his intention here is to persuade and to argue, and you can see that technique being used there in that imperative. So we also get, and you can see this here, I'll use my vocabulary colour just to highlight those, is we talked about before in video 1, the use of phonetic, where you write as you would say it, explain yourself, what you mean. So we call this phonetic when it's written how it's said. Now remember when I said to you that writing phonetically adds to his performance poetry, but it also links to that intention of wanting to show that he has, he is quite diverse. He's got multiple cultures and experiences in his life, and it's something to celebrate. So the choice there is on purpose. And for your alternative interpretation, you could link back to this oral tradition as well. So that idea that it was illegal to teach reading and writing to slaves. So what you had really was just what people learnt through speech, which is where you get phonetic spelling, because that will be what it was learnt through speech. Okay, so the next bit you can see in the second stanza, I'm going to use my imagery colour here, is we get the first of several core images that he uses, or metaphors that he uses, to explain how ridiculous the phrase half-caste is. So he uses Picasso first of all. So for those of you who are not sure who Picasso is, he's the 20th century Spanish painter, very famous for his using of quite abstract art and colours and shapes to create things like faces. And there is an activity which you can have a go at to create your own Picasso face as well. But have a look at what he's meaning here. So this person here is quite famous. So let's just label this a metaphor first. So you mean when Picasso, now he was Spanish painter who was very famous for mixing and creating a brand new art, essentially. So he's saying, so half-caste is when Picasso mixes red and green is a half-caste canvas. So I always think this is quite interesting, that the lack of punctuation here. Now we do get this line, which is almost like it's a question, but more rhetorical. So the fact that there's no question mark there is just him making a statement to say, look how ridiculous this is. You're saying that half-caste is just like when a really famous, well-respected painter mixes colours together. We call that a half-caste canvas because he's mixed two things together. So he's setting up this comparison on purpose to show the ridiculousness to show the ridiculousness of this phrase, because this is someone who is celebrated for mixing two colours together. So how can it be that we would celebrate someone for mixing something in a piece of artwork, but it cannot be celebrated in a person? So there's the first key image that he uses. And I think I'm going to use just my structure colour probably just to indicate that this here is kind of phrased like a rhetorical question, in the sense that, is this what you mean? Is this the ridiculousness of what you're saying? And it's rhetorical because his answer is clearly that we say, well, no, Picasso didn't make half-cast canvases. They were amazing. So that's the intention there with that structure. Okay, so then we get our second image. So explain yourself what you mean when you say half-cast. You mean when light and shadow mix in the sky is a half-cast weather. So there's humour here, and you can see that it's quite light-hearted at the beginning, and he plays on the humour of British weather essentially. So we've got this half-cast weather is our second metaphor, this English weather. And its tone is quite light. There's still humour in his first persuasive techniques. If you can see this as him like building this argument up, he starts quite light with humour. So what is he saying in this imagery here? So again, look at that repetition, by the way. I'm not going to label it, I'm just going to highlight it. What you mean, what do you mean, what do you mean? So I get that sense from that repetition that it happens a lot to him, and it's something that he's getting more and more frustrated about. Okay, so let's have a look at this imagery here. When light and shadow mix in the sky is half-cast weather. So this idea of like rain and shine is quite British. It's quite common, almost considered like that is the British tradition, that it rains and then we get a little bit of light. So you can see here that he's playing with that idea that, well, it's okay when in Britain it rains and then there's sunshine and then there's a rainbow, and when they're mixed in the sky, that's fine. We don't call that half-cast weather. So there's a ridiculousness about that as well, behind that humour. Okay. Well, in that case, England weather, nearly always half-cast. So you can see this continuation here, and I think, sorry, let me go back to this light and shadow. We can see here that there's a reference to colour, particularly that plays out all the way through. We started on the red and the green as a colour here as mixing, but then we've come closer and closer to talking about race and colour. So we've got the light and shadow here. So notice how he's building that intentional use of colour as a representation of half-cast imagery elsewhere. Well, in that case, there's the dialect. England weather, nearly always half-cast. So there's the humour. In fact, some of them clouds half-cast till they're overcast. So we get a pun here. I'm just going to highlight the dialect again. But I think the one thing that we do want to point out is the play on words. Overcast is a pun. Now a pun is a play on words, so that means that it's got multiple meanings. The best way I can explain that is think about all the times they use puns at Easter time. It's going to be excellent. So they're playing on that word. It's got two meanings, excellent and egg, reference to Easter eggs. So a pun, it's when it's got two meanings, and we can see here that the first one is about weather. So some of the clouds are half-cast till they're overcast. So this is the full pun here. Okay, so when we talk about the weather and it being overcast, we're talking about the fact it's being really cloudy. But also we're talking about caste in the sense of the title of this poem. So half caste in the title of this poem is that reference to purity and race. So he's still got that humour there, but you can see how he's building that in and linking that to the title and his purpose of this kind of persuasive argument not to use this terminology. The one thing I do want to pick up on here as well, which I'm hoping you noticed before with Picasso, is, and let me just circle it, is the fact that he doesn't use capital letters for proper nouns. Now you can consider why he does that. I think there is intention there, same as all of his punctuation. There's no capitals for proper nouns. And I'm wondering if that's him trying to show that everyone's on an even keel, like everybody's equal. Picasso, yeah, he's famous, but he's the same as everybody else. England is not above anybody else. We're the same. And when you don't create capital letters, it creates kind of this like unity, like all on the same level. And that opposes that caste, which is so it kind of juxtaposes the hierarchy of the term caste. And remember, juxtapose means next to. So it juxtaposes caste, which is that hierarchy of race. Okay. Oh, we jumped back there. Right, so some spiteful them don't want the sun pass arras. So here we have, again, Caribbean dialects. It's an expletive here, it just means like my ass. So it's Caribbean dialect for my ass. That's him. I feel like there's his frustration coming out a little bit, like he's saying, well, we talk about the English weather being overcast, we're not being spiteful and cruel. It's not that we're saying we don't want the sun to be there. We're not saying, you know, you're not saying anything about the weather mixing. That's ridiculous. So why do we use this phrase? Why do we allow this phrase? So I think this is where we start to see a tone change. I wonder if I'll use my intention colour here. I think we see maybe a tone shift slightly. I'm going to put it as a question mark because I can always go back and look at that. Okay, then we get our third one in this stanza, and this will be the end of this video. So, explain yourself, look at that repetition. What do you mean when you say half caste? You mean Tchaikovsky sit down at the piano and mix a black key with a white key is a half caste symphony. So, next one, and notice again we've got the small letter. Tchaikovsky, he is, for those of you that don't know, is a 19th century Russian composer. So music, so he's used art, he's used weather, he's used music as his metaphor imagery. And again, because he's well renowned, that idea of you mix certain things together, and look at his use of colour here. He's got even more specific. We started with red and green, light and shadow, and now he is being really specific here, black and white, specific reference to human colour skin as well, and how it's referred to when we talk about race and dual heritage. He's used this, I think they're in order on purpose is what I'm saying. He's being much more specific here. So he's talking about how on a piano, when you mix the black and the white key, it makes such beautiful music, and that's renowned and it's respected. And that's what that imagery is conjuring up, the idea of the wow, the respect, the awe, the love, all of that. He's saying, how is it we've got that from mixing these colours here into music, but we don't have that celebration in how we view people who have mixed black and white. And again, I think structurally there's this rhetorical question effect where he's not using a question mark, he's just making this statement like, this is ridiculous that we celebrate this and it's not celebrated elsewhere. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Okay, so that's the end of probably the longest stanza. The next video will look at stanza 3.